you very much and for coming here and giving us your time, being here for this talk. I'm planning to share my journey with you a bit, experiences from my research and my filmmaking. And so I'm going to talk a bit and show you some slides and explain a bit about my journey. I'm also going to show you some films in between here and there. So take you on the journey with me into the tales of the tribes. And then we're going to do like some interactive questions and answers. And then finally, at the end, I'm planning to show you a documentary film, which I've made just recently. It's not actually released in any way yet. That's a 26-minute film, so it's really up to you. I put that at the end. It's for those who are interested to stay or can stay, otherwise, you know, it's your program. So the first thing is, I think I should give you a little introduction about where I'm from, the kind of background I'm from, because it will help you to understand what an unusual journey I'm on, especially considering my culture and where I come from, right? And also it might inspire people and give you an idea of what could attract somebody to this topic. So yes, my origins is British person, born in India. So my society is kind of an individualistic society, right? Small family. I was encouraged to do whatever I wanted. Means I wasn't really directed into any kind of profession. So that's the kind of background I come from, where I went to art college. But then everything, of course, changed in the mid-90s. You know, with the scale of the introduction of computer technology in every field and in every circumstance, like as we see now. So in those days, you know, in my childhood and so forth, you know, I played outdoors a lot and I had many hobbies, you know, and I used to make things with my hands. I used to enjoy making handmade things, you know, models and so forth. I also read a lot of old-fashioned books, fairy tales and folk tales. Then I got connected to West Highland Animation, which is an animation company in Scotland. And I also went to art college. I studied my BA Hons in animation at college in the early 90s, mid-90s. I graduated and I got inspired by artistic animators. This is all like in the analog tradition, no computer technology. In fact, they brought in all the computer technology the year after I left the art college. So basically my background is in film, analog filmmaking, traditional techniques and storytelling. And I was inspired by artists like this, artists in the medium of animation. This would be like Jan Švankma. He's a master artist from Czechoslovakia. He's pretty old now, but for decades he used to make these really quite unusual films. I was really fascinated by computer-generated 3D animation. It's what I wanted to do. And, you know, then I sat down and I taught myself how to use, it was called in those days Power Animator, and then it became Maya finally. So for many years, I taught myself on my first workstation PC how to use Maya. And with West Highland Animation, this company in Scotland, she is my mentor, one of my mentors, the director of that company. And for about 30 years, she had been making films based on the Scottish folk tales from Scotland, yeah? And she introduced me to the folk tales in animation, and she would make these films, and she would get support for these films from cultural organizations in Scotland. We're talking about here the 80s, 90s, yeah? she did at least 20, 25 years, 30 years of making these films in her whole career. And they were supported by cultural organizations in Scotland on the provision that she made a Gaelic language version of all the films, animations, because it was an effort by the Scottish cultural bodies to try and sustain this indigenous language of Scotland, this Scots Gaelic language. So this was important for me because it introduced me for the first time to minority languages, and also the importance of it and the significance of minority languages and the need to sustain their languages. And it was through West Highland animation that got me into this whole field of tribal animation in India, because mostly in about 2002 I had been freelancing. I had been in Delhi freelancing at this television company where I had taught myself Maya. And Leslie Mackenzie, I went to visit her in Scotland one summer, and she said, I think, should we make some folk tales, some Indian folk tales in animation films? Would you like to be involved in this kind of project? So then I, of course, said yes. You know, I really wanted to do it. I had graduated from art college. I had expected that with my BA Hons in animation, people would be coming up to me and going, okay, now you're qualified, now you can direct an animation film. But of course that never happened, because it doesn't really work like that in the real world. But Leslie Mackenzie finally said to me, look, would you like to do some folk tales from India in animation? Frankly, she is running out of material from Scotland, because over this 25 years she had translated all the stories into animation films. And she would work with young people, you know, for economic reasons and other reasons as well. You know, it was kind of in the educational sphere. So what I'm trying to say is that young people, that means like art school graduates and students also, and I was one of them. We did the animation on her films and she directed it, and that's how I learnt to do this stuff. And she was now proposing that I could do something in India, these folk tales. So I was really excited, because I thought, wow, this is my chance now to make an animation film, which is what I really wanted to do. Professional, with a client and a budget and all of that kind of stuff. So I went away and I thought, this is great, I'm going to be able to do this. Then I went back the next year and to visit her, and she said to me, but I thought you wanted to do some folk tales of some Indian stories. And I said, yes, I really, really want to do that. Then she said to me, well, you know, you better start working on it then. I had been expecting her to just give me the project, you know, but she wasn't having any of that. So basically, I got initiated into the process of actually trying to raise funds for projects, write proposals, do budgets, do research. And I did that, and I became the India coordinator because I was living in India. I was based mostly in India for this project called the Tallest Story Competition. It took about 3 or 4 years to make those animation films. We started in around 2003 and we completed it in 2006, right? And I was the assistant producer on that. So this is where I learned a lot of this kind of skills of how to devise a project and manage a project. And this is one, I also did manage to animate my film, which is this film here. I'm going to show you the film now. The Tallest Story Competition is a collection of 5 short films. They are all based on Adivasi stories from central India.
Away with you!
Leave our village alone!
Stop these elephants ruining our lives!
Elephant, I am angry with you. Stop destroying people's homes and crops.
The elephant promised he would leave man alone. But he soon forgot his promise, and he returned to his old ways.
Oi! This is too much!
Our crops ruined!
Our house is smashed!
The tribal god has a plan.
Hold a great feast for the elephant.
If you say so.
We're ready!
Start the drumming!
At last, when the elephant could eat no more, he fell fast asleep. Just as the tribal god had planned.
These are a clever invention. Maybe someone else needs them.
That is how the peacock got its tail.
Hmm.
And the banana tree got leaves. The elephant discovered that while he had been asleep, his wings had gone. So he ran into the jungle, where he has lived ever since.
We're free!
We're free!
So if you are asleep like the elephant, you will lose your freedom.
That's like the start of my journey into this tribal storytelling, and also it shows you that I was really interested in the 3D, which is now I'm moving away from that more and more. So yeah, then it was by the way, this film and the whole series, it was funded because it was in Gaelic language. So that's also quite obscure when you think about it, that there are these Adivasi tribal stories from India being told in Gaelic, right? Scots Gaelic, for Gaelic students and children and audiences. It came on the TV also. But of course we did do this English version for wider audiences. And also Leslie insisted that we had to have it in the tribal languages as well, because that was her whole thing, remember, was this minority cultures and minority languages. And it would be the wrong attitude to think that we have to return it to them in English, because they don't really speak English mostly. So it became my job to get these collection of 5 films translated into 5 different languages in central India. And because Leslie was not able to come to India again and again, I was based in India, and also because of the weather situation and all, she's from Scotland, so she couldn't really handle such hot temperatures for too long periods of time. So I was the one that got sent out into the field to get these stories translated and dubbed, and that was a big education for me, because I had to meet all these artists and local people again for the second time. I'd already met them once when we did our research, but now I was meeting them again for this translation and voice recording. And having gone to all that work, because it was a huge amount of work to put it into 5 languages, then the next thing came up, which was it has to be screened in those languages because only those people understand those languages. So then I went again for the third time back to the all those different places. Basically that was, well, Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, West Bengal, yeah, these 5 places. And I had to go and screen the films to local audiences in their local languages. And that was actually a really, really wonderful experience because normally animators, they're stuck away making the thing and they never get to see and interact with their audiences. And I'm showing films to children en masse, like 20,000 children I screened to finally over a couple of months of touring around. And it wasn't just like a random tour. Luckily, I had already met people in each place, so they could help me as coordinators and also as translators for the screenings, because I had to introduce the films each time. And, then my translator would translate it into Hindi for the kids and all. And they would all vote for their favorite story. And basically, it really inspired me because I could see that the kids, they told me also, and it was obvious, that they really enjoyed seeing their own stories and their own familiar art forms in their own languages for the first time. Because we're also talking about schools in rather remote places, these government schools which don't have much funding at all, so they don't get any materials, And then I was coming from someone from outside and with projector, because I had to take my own projector and all, and amplifier, and screening those films in the schools. So that was really inspiring for me. But then I also screened the series in academic institutions in India and also in the UK. For example, I screened at the Indira Gandhi National Centre for the Arts in Delhi, and I also screened the films in the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. And then I got different responses from different audiences. The kids loved it. What about the academic audiences? And this is where there was a bit of criticism also came up, questioning, because that's what academic audiences like to do, right? And they were saying, well, what was the actual involvement of the local people in your project? Maybe it was minimal, and is that ethically correct and all of that? Yeah. So then, next slide is actually there, which is my next stage of the journey, which was doing this as a PhD. Yeah. And it was quite unexpected the way the PhD turned up. Of course I applied, but I didn't really expect to get it, the grant and the scholarship. It was just good luck that I got it, really, because, I was the only one. I did it at Bournemouth University in the UK as part of their Centre for Digital Entertainment, digital media program, right? So all the other people that were doing their PhDs, my batchmates, they were all doing this really high-tech stuff, like computer programming, algorithms, fast rendering systems. It was all this high-tech stuff. And there was me talking about tribal stories in India. It was quite different. And every time I had to make a presentation at my university, I always felt a bit self-conscious because I was talking about animating with beads and clay and sand, and other students were showing all these high-tech rendering systems on the presentations. But also maybe this is part of the reason why I got the scholarship, because it was something completely different, and that's what they like, at least in the UK, that's what they like for PhD studies. So this is my university, and I'm going to show you a film, the next film. And my project at Bournemouth University, The Tales of the Tribes, Animation as a Tool for Indigenous Representation, it was practice-led research. And that means that I was a practitioner. Basically, I was a filmmaker, but at the same time, I was going to do research. So 50% of of the PhD was this thesis, and 50% was making some films. And the thesis had to critique and explain and give the whole context and background and research and everything for the animation films. And it actually took 7 years to complete the animation films, and I managed to write the thesis in 5 years. And it took it really to a much deeper level. That's really what I want to say, because at first, in the earlier project, it was all about the aesthetics. I liked tribal art and craft because I felt it was attractive. It was good for animation because it was simple to do. It was very colorful, it was very vibrant. And also, as you know, the Wali type of art is one kind of art, the Gon type of art is another type. It was like a brand, you could say. That when you look at a film using Wali art, it's very distinctive, it's like a brand, right? So from an aesthetic point of view, I liked those art forms and I had been playing around with them. But now I was doing it at a PhD level, and there were these questions about the ethics of doing this. Yeah. And so my project was to really explore that ethics of doing this and collaborating with communities, because they had to be involved. It was their stories, their culture. They had to have a voice in what was being done. And then lots of theoretical research. These terms here, indigenous, Adivasi, and tribe, it's quite contentious, especially in India. What does it mean, indigenous, Adivasi, and tribe? We use these words without too much of thought. There are 84 million of them in India, 8.2% of the population. However, all the tribal people are not, all the indigenous people are not necessarily tribal people, because everyone says that the wider Hindu society is also indigenous. And then this Adivasi term, it's accepted in central India, but not in northeast India. They don't consider themselves to be Adivasis there. They prefer the word tribe. So it's all like quite political issues that I've started to deal with. The other thing is that it's, who are these people, because we really don't hear anything about them, They are largely unknown, even in India, let alone abroad, right? They are underrepresented. We don't know much about their representation. We don't see them much in the media. And basically they are marginalized communities, right? Unheard, unspoken, unrepresented communities. And in the research part now, how am I going to represent these? The only thing I really had to go on tribal representation is from the colonial period, from anthropology, yeah? And these colonial anthropologists would have described those tribal communities and societies as being archaic, backward, static, not changing, like suspended in some ancient period of time, illiterate. And generally society, even today, certainly earlier on and even also today, we, consider these communities as being not useful unless they learn skills for employment, and are prepared to integrate and assimilate. Yeah? So this was this description of other, describing another culture and other, and it was used by the dominant society, by in the colonial period and also since, in a negative context, so that we can be more sophisticated, more smart, more educated or whatever in comparison to the others. Yeah? So these people, basically they are economically marginalized. They are speaking, even today, we think something similar, generally speaking, economically marginalized. They are speaking lots and lots of different languages. We can't recognize what languages they are speaking. They look different. different appearance, yeah, and they have all kinds of different habits, you know, and eating habits is very different, yeah, and we also even sometimes think of them as headhunters, you know. So basically the overall description is not very favorable by society at large. But we do all know that they have beautiful, pretty art forms and crafts and attractive dances. So that's like a general kind of understanding of. But what about the indigenous knowledge that is depicted and expressed in their art and dance and rituals and way of life? That's something we don't know very much about. Yeah. Okay, I think I'll just break the talk now for a bit, and perhaps I'll just show you a film from the Tales of the Tribes. And then we'll talk a little bit more about that. This Tales of the Tribes series, which took 7 years to make, I did collaborate with different communities across the country for this, and it was much deeper involvement than the previous project. And I'm going to show you one of the films now from that series. Where are we? Abutani is a story from Arunachal Pradesh. It's common to actually 5 tribes of Arunachal Pradesh, the story of Abutani, the first man. So I'll show you that short film just to give you a little break. अच्छा लो just take.
Hello everyone, I'm Barrier Elvin. I'm here to tell you some stories from tribal India. I have heard that there is a trophy for the best story. Now that is for you to decide. You must listen to these stories and choose your favorite. Many years ago, I lived with the gods at the heart of tribal India. They still have wonderful stories, fantasy stories, and tall tales.
So now, I'm going to tell you a bedtime story. I'm going to tell you a folk tale of 2 brothers that also explain how we became black. Once upon a time, there were 2 brothers who loved each other very much.
Abutane!
Yes.
Abutani had second sight because of his extra set of eyes. He knew what was coming.
Abutane!
Yes.
Why can't you look after your animals properly? I cannot live with this anymore.
How dare you? This is too much. I can't live with you anymore. Let us divide the land right now and live separately.
All right. I will take the land in the valley.
No. I want it. You go to the hills.
All right. I'll go to the hill then.
Come, brother. Let's celebrate this day as a new beginning. Let us sacrifice the Mithun before we part ways.
Hello friend, you look tired. Why don't you take a rest and I will guard your meat?
That is a good idea. I will rest for a while. Now I'm going to teach that Tapeng a lesson he will never forget.
And that is how we became black in color. But that was not the end. When Abutani lost his extra eyes, he lost his magical powers.
Stop! This cannot go on. From Abotani will come the race of men. From Yapom will come the race of Uyus.
Yes. And the orders must be given in writing. I cannot trust Abotani.
Then give me something to write on. This is for you. And this is for you.
Oh, I am so hungry.
So this is why the children of Abotani did not know anything of reading and writing.
And what about Yapom? What happened to him?
He lives at the top of the tree to this day.
Abutane!
Abotani kadinjam, abotaro kadinjam, abotani kadinjam, logistical kadinjam, udi solo kadinjam, polo yadidam. Buddhi tolo yadidam. Abotani yadidam. Komdu utuma yadidam. Tumen loyu yadidam.
The Tales of the Tribes. I just show you some different slideshow for a minute. I just show you some stills. That was the last film, right? Some stills from the last film, right? Okay, the Tales of the Tribes. Some stills from how we made the Tales of the Tribes. It is a collection of 5 short stories. The first one is the Pradhan Gon story, because I had worked with them earlier for the taller story competition, and it was a taller story. It was a competition for the best story. So I had asked the kids in all those places to vote for the favorite story, and we counted all the votes, and it was a Gond story that got the most votes. So those Gond artists, they were by now really quite interested in animation, and they were coming to me. I had helped to facilitate 2 Gond artists to go to Scotland in 2007 to collect the trophy for winning the most votes from the audience. And anyway, these Gond artists, Gond community, they were contacting me and they were saying, oh, we want to make more, we want to do something else. So then I thought, okay, seeing as they won the competition, let the first film in the next series, the Tales of the Tribes, let that be the Gond film. And in that film, we did the workshop at National Institute of Design in 2012 and brought some Gond artists to come and help us. And then there was the Arunachal one, the one you've just seen, the Abotani story, which was actually done. I did a workshop as part of the PhD project, because it was all about how to work with local communities. So we had the workshop in Arunachal Pradesh with Rajiv Gandhi University, and then the models that were made, the models for this film, they were made by my colleague. You'll see his picture in a minute. And then there was a Sikkim film, a story from Sikkim, Nimail Kyong, which again did a workshop in Gangtok in 2010 to engage with some local storytellers and artists and students there to do the Sikkim film. As you can see here, some Tanka artists who have designed the characters. Yeah, this is a picture of the premiere screening of the Tales of the Tribes in 2017 in the Pradhan Gon village in the middle of central heart of India near Amarkantak. Had a wonderful premiere screening program. Some pictures of me recording the Apatani in Arunachal Pradesh. Screening the films. Again, the Tales of the Tribes also had to go into all these different languages, So there was Manipuri film, a Naga film, a Lepcha film, a Gond film, and an Abotani film from Arunachal. So it had to go into all these languages, and I went back and screened them to all the kids again. And again, here they are voting for their favorite story. And in the process, he is a traditional priest from Arunachal Pradesh. I had all kinds of adventures on this journey. At one point, our Abotani film faced some big problems. And it came to a complete standstill, and the whole team kind of dissipated and left. Then I went back to Arunachal Pradesh and I picked up those 2 little huts that you see in the film. And at the time I thought, okay, let me go and consult the local priest and ask him that maybe this problem with the film might have had something to do with the spirits, because the whole story was about spirits. There was Abotani and his brother, who was the father of all the spirits. So anyway, I went to the traditional priest, who, by the way, had advised us in the workshop earlier, and I said this had happened, and I said, could this be anything to do with your spirits and all? And he was absolutely convinced. He said, yeah, you're doing a film about the spirits of our community and you didn't really ask their permission. So I said, well, can you help us? Then he did his traditional puja, his prayer, and then after that the film carried on and got finished. So that was the Tales of the Tribes, and now I'll just escape this one for a minute before I move on to the current project. Yeah. What did I learn from doing? The Tales of the Tribes. What did I learn in this whole process? Well, research, the importance of research. Yeah. Ethics and authenticity and research. Research, the responsibility for accurate and sensitive approaches to this filmmaking. Yeah, getting inputs from local members, not just as informants, not just taking from them, but working together with them as collaborators. Yeah. And look at research. Here we are researching the traditional art forms of the Nagaland, for the Nagaland story. You know, going to museums and archives and looking at their traditional sculptures and textiles, and then trying to adapt that look for the animation. Using cowrie shells, animating. This is a little workshop for doing the title sequence, animating with cowrie shells. Again, working quite a bit with students and ex-students of National Institute of Design for this project, and trying out all different techniques and materials, and this thing of trying to make a synergy between, you know, computer technology and softwares, and also handmade artworks, and referring always back to the traditional art forms. And storytellers, you know, the elders in each of these traditional communities, they are the knowledge keepers. They are the ones who know the stories, not the young ones. So they are our guides, because we had to get the stories, the correct stories, and they had to be happy with what we were doing. Working with the younger people to create the artwork. Like I mentioned earlier, the students of Tanka painting here, this is some of the artwork they created for the Sikkim film. And in Manipur, doing these cutout puppet designs. You know, and there's so many issues which I'm not going to talk about, you know, with this issue. For example, this thing about not dictating to them. At the same time, I wanted what I wanted. I mean, I had ideas of how I would like these films to turn out based on folk art form designs. But in this case, in Manipur, when I did the workshop in 2012, I worked with some really nice artists, and we did this folk art form. But when I left after the 3-week-long workshop, the person from Manipur who decided to direct the film, he threw out all those folk art forms, and he said, look, we in Manipur are used to seeing what we are used to seeing, which is basically commercial animation. And I would like this film to be done in that style, because I feel that it will get a good reception in Manipur, because it will be what people are used to seeing. And there wasn't really much that I could do about that. So it took its own different direction. And this is kind of what we ended up with. Yeah, but in each case, researching the indigenous art forms, the textiles, also looking at books. This was Verya Elwin's book. He was an anthropologist. He was the one who introduced the Tales of the Tribes. We turned him into a cartoon animated character, referring to his documentation. He had written 26 books on the tribe and photographed their artworks, and going, like I said, going to the cultural elders in each place. There you see wearing that bear skin thing. There he's that same traditional priest. And here, yes, adapting traditional designs, the wood carving design for animated character, animating that character against the blue screen in stop motion with the help of Wangdan, who for quite a while he was really an active person in this project, from Arunachal Pradesh, and that's how I got introduced to the Wancho, which I'm going to be talking about next. And yes, Jonathan Marchant, he was at art college with me doing his BA, and then he got in touch with me, and he was so good in making the models. He made all the animation models for that film you just saw. That was his passion and interest, and he had volunteered, and I paid for his, from my grant, I paid for his travel to come from England to Arunachal Pradesh, and he attended our workshop, and he showed all the participants how to make these stop motion models. That's how we all learned how to do that. Veria Elwin was there, adapted as the storyteller, and again, here's me doing the premiere screening in that tribal village. Okay, the issues and things that I faced in this work. The political issues, lots of political issues, because I didn't realize this before, but there are conflicts between different tribal groups. It's basically about resources and land and stuff like that. Ethnic conflicts, and if we are representing, for example, that story which is for it was common to 5 different tribal groups. Which version are we going to take? Is it okay to mix and match or not? All these were big issues, and actually it's not okay to mix and match, because then it's like they will say, oh, those other tribal people are taking our story, and it gets confusing. Then, of course, I mentioned earlier the discrimination that indigenous tribal communities face everywhere in the world, and also in India, and that means that they are not getting their projects supported. Yeah. And then there's, of course, demotivation, because this is not only with indigenous people that I'm working, I'm also working with students of media and animation, and design students in these projects. And they also were demotivated a lot of the time. We didn't have big budgets. We had small money. We were going step by step. And long distances. And very poor communication because of poor networks. Emails not working so well, people not having the access to the internet and the phone in remote areas. And that's when I found out that really face-to-face is what counts when you're working with people in remote areas. And this whole project, from PhD onwards, is really about questioning. And why so many questions, and it's a continuous process of questioning oneself and one's motivation. I was doing this for years, so these kind of questions were coming up over and over again. Why am I doing this? Why do we make animation films at all? Well, it's usually got this these days it's really got this financial aspect to it, because the computer technology is one part of it. It's so expensive, you need so much resources that it costs a lot of money to make an animation film. And this computer technology is mostly in the commercial mass media domain. So in commercial industry and in advertising is one of the reasons we use animation in the entertainment industry. But in my case, it's this experimental animation, which is something different. It's about self-expression, and research. So at the end of the research phase, so many questions, and it's not necessarily about coming up with an answer, because the answer will also change as time goes on. But it's this necessity to keep asking these questions, like, why am I making this film? Who's it for? And the message and the context. Who's it for? Because that determines how you're going to make the film. And there's all this tension between wanting to do your artistic creation and at the same time having to communicate to audiences, and also to maybe sometimes please a client and communicate with audiences. And what kind of audiences, because urban audiences are very different from rural audiences. British audiences are different from Indian audiences. you know. Academic audiences are different from younger audiences. And why to do this? This indigenous knowledge was something also that I wanted to really talk about, because the indigenous knowledge is something that most people don't know much about. You know, they see the art forms, they see the dances, but they don't know much about the knowledge that's represented in these art forms and dances. And this is knowledge about community, about relationships. Indigenous knowledge is something which has come kind of topical this day and age, right? Maybe not so much yet in India, but we have indigenous communities all over the world, like the Aboriginal Australians, the Native Americans, Canadian Inuit, so many different. And their knowledge is about community, relationships, cooperation. It's integrated, inclusive knowledge, yeah? And it's about the family and it's familiar knowledge. It's about knowledge about restraint of use of resources. It's adaptability, self-sufficiency, and self-reliance. I mean, we are now at a critical time. We all know that, you know, because the mass media is full of horror stories of environmental destruction and catastrophe, fires, polluted air, water, floods, diseases. You know, now really is the right time to study and apply indigenous knowledge and ways of knowing. And this knowledge is embedded in the stories. Yeah? This oral tradition. The stories, they illuminate the relationships between life forms, and this knowledge is communicated in a holistic, integrated way. It's told in a mythical, symbolic, creative, artistic, and entertaining way, so that it's easily remembered, because it's told orally, so you have to remember it. And it's passed on from generation to generation. But now, of course, there's sudden changes have hit these traditional societies all around the world. And suddenly these people who have been self-sufficient and self-reliant and actually satisfied with their way of life and working together and cooperating like in the village environment, suddenly now they have to buy things, they need money, they need education, they need jobs, yeah? And the entire traditional way of life is disrupted, yeah? And the younger people in these communities, they are no longer satisfied with the traditional way of life. So this is sort of the reason why we are doing this project, because the stories are getting lost. They're not getting transmitted the way they used to be, because the younger people have other priorities nowadays than to listen to grandparents' stories. So maybe this idea of taking their stories and adapting it for audiovisual media is a way of sustaining the knowledge for the tribal communities themselves, and also publicizing it, promoting it, making it better known, because it'll be perhaps has some good use in this situation with this environmental situation, yeah? And then this issue of ethics. Have I got some more issues there? The ethics. What is this ethics? Well, it's about transparency is the first thing, you know, being transparent to your people you're working with, and also to yourself. It means basically not hiding things. And that comes down to communication, and it's the responsibility of the researcher and the media producer to communicate properly. And it's also about relationships, because the whole culture of these traditional societies is about relationships. So unlike, you know, scientific research where you're objective and you're standing out as an outsider, it's more about developing relationships. Yeah, acknowledgement, giving acknowledgement is so important. And that's in the credits. It's also acknowledging that these people have wisdom and that they're not just working for me, but they have got a lot to contribute in their own rights. They are partners in the project. Yeah? And reciprocity, which basically is giving back. These are like the principles of working with Indigenous content. And yeah, and then authenticity. I mean, what does that mean? Because that's something I also have to look a lot at in my research. And I think it's part of that is recognize it's doing good research because you have this responsibility to represent something with sensitivity and accuracy. But it's also about recognizing and acknowledging your own impact on the interpretation. So you've got to realize that it's not an objective thing, it's your view of what you're doing, you know. And it's easy to say that, but it's something we forget so easily, you know. And the other thing is this is an adaptation. It's not, every film is an adaptation, even a story is an adaptation because every storyteller will tell it differently. And when you're taking from an oral tradition or a text into audiovisual medium, you are adapting it. And you better you understand that and realize how your own conditioning and not experience and outlook on life is affecting that adaptation. That's like what I think that authenticity implies, that you're aware of these things, that you look at these things. And of course, intellectual property rights. And this, again, here I'm now again doing some quotes. Because who is actually entitled to represent these cultures? That's another big, major question. I'm an outsider, I'm not from these communities. What is my role in this whole process? What gives me the right to tell their stories? You know, and Istareen Kire, she's from Nagaland, and she's a well-known author, and in my PhD I had to interview people about this issue. And she was saying that no one can represent a Naga as well as a Naga himself can. Yeah? So do you really need to be from the community to tell the story? And Shekhar had also added there, Shekhar Mukherjee from NID at that time was saying that, you know, that basically a Indigenous person has to be involved in this project. Otherwise, you know, if you're just taking the design and the story away from the cultural context, it becomes like a disturbed visual work. It becomes like a wall hanging. It doesn't really have any meaning. Yeah? So the appropriation of Indigenous art forms is contentious. It's something which is you've got to look at and study and understand and think about. It has to be done with a lot of thought. But the other side of the story is that, you know, when non-Indigenous people like me, artists and audiences, when they appreciate the art forms and the stories, it encourages them. So it's not like you should just leave them alone and have nothing to do with it. It's all about working together. Because often it's like that when you get some recognition from somebody outside your own community, then you reevaluate and see the value of your own traditions. And Istareen there was saying that, you know, when it can function as a reference point for the local, it can inspire local artists and local animators and filmmakers to also do it. Yeah, appropriation of tribal art, it does get done. Here we have the Coca-Cola advertisement done in the Wali style. This is very contentious. Should this be done or not done? And who by? Personally, I wouldn't do it because my work is in the educational and social context. Yeah, they are made in workshops, they're developed in workshops, and they promote research and collaboration and analysis But however, so I decided that I'm not in a position to commercialize this work because it's not my traditions. But should an indigenous community want to do that, yeah, then this whole issue of intellectual copyright issues come in, you know, and what's going to happen to the income and how to share that and distribute it with those communities. For which I set up the Adivasi Arts Trust in the UK in 2007 to help deal with this issue, that if we do get any income, we will be putting it into our projects to involve tribal artists, indigenous artists more. It's a non-for-profit charitable organization. Yeah, and bringing the stories chord stories, and how I got there and everything, because it's one of the most remote corners. In fact, today I was just telling my Wancho collaborator and friend on this project that I will be talking about the Wancho project today's presentation, and he was so happy because really hardly anyone knows about these Wancho people. I don't know if anyone here has ever heard of Wancho before. Right? And you're not alone in this matter, because most people, because they are like near Myanmar, they are like maybe 10 kilometers from the Myanmar border, so they're right in the very fringes of the country. And in fact, people are not allowed to go, I mean, foreigners like me, we're just not allowed to go there because it's a disturbed area, because it's border area. And even for Indian people, they also need to get special permit. And I thought I would never be able to go there. I had met already Wangdan, who was a Wancho, and he was the one who said to me, oh look, I want to do a Wancho story, can you help me in animation? And I asked him, what kind of story do you want to do? And he couldn't, being a young Wancho who had never really grown up never listened to his grandparents because he was educated in boarding schools and had gone to NID and places, so he didn't know any Wancho stories. So the long and short of it was that, and there are no books of Wancho stories either, so the long and short of it was that I had to go there. So there was some communication with younger people, and thankfully my collaborator, my right-hand man there, Jatwang Wangsa, he's a teacher in a primary school, so he was fluent in English. He and his colleague, Banwang Losu, they were the ones that are responsible for my project in the Wancho area, my entry into that community. And now I have been about 4 or 5 times, and they have made me this very nice house there to live in, out of bamboo. And they made it for me, but because I can't really live there because it's so far and all, I felt very kind of like responsible that they have made this beautiful house for me. So I turned it into the Wancho Center for Art, Culture and Knowledge. I made that sign for them and trying to make it into a little cultural center for them, that house. And we are sitting around in that beautiful bamboo house looking at animation films. And of course they were like, oh, show us some Bollywood films, show us some Bollywood films. And I'm like, I'm not showing you any Bollywood films. I'm here to convert you to animators. So I showed them animations. Finally, they liked it. And then the storytellers are the elder people. They don't speak any English. So luckily, my translation is a big job in this work, and it's very difficult. And this is the chief of one of the villages. They wear these blue beads around just below the knee. It's a magical story of how he comes out of the gourd. And here we are, COVID lockdown last year. You know, I'm in Dehradun based and I have what to do. I really want to go over to the Wancho area. I couldn't because of lockdown. So I was sitting there in my place modeling. I made the tribal chief, Wancho chief, based on photographs from a book, based on that guy actually in his whole tribal gear, because there was a photo of him. And then finally I did manage to go back to the Wancho area in 2020. What's the time? Okay, 2020. That was when there was a little break in the lockdowns, and I managed to get permission again. So I went back there for another 30 days, and my mission was like, I'm going to do a workshop there in the school, at Jatwang's school. Actually, the school was closed because of lockdown, but the premises was there. And I said, I'm going to use this as my workshop. And I told Jatwang, I said, please, can you call some youngsters who might be interested in animation to come to the workshop? And he said, yes. And then finally it was set and organized. And on the first day of the workshop, maybe 20 people turned up, or at least 15. And I was like, wow, this is great. This is so good. And I had carried all my equipment, means lights, green screen, camera, laptops, everything, materials, huge luggage, all the way to across the entire country from Dehradun to that Wancho village. And I was really encouraged when there were so many participants on the first day. But then the second day, nobody turned up. So then I said to Jatwang, so why is nobody turning up? And then he said, well, so they have to do this and they have to do that. And they are meant to be building houses and they're meant to be doing field work. So I'm sorry they can't come to your workshop. And I'm like, well, how on earth am I going to make an animation film like this? So anyway, I decided, okay, I'm going to come every day myself and work away. And let's see what happens. And slowly, some participants drifted in. And after a while, just like in our workshop upstairs, people actually got enthusiastic. And I'm going to show you the animatic that we did. This is some of the things that we did in our workshop. They made masks out of goods. And this is a story about the first beings again, and according to this story, they believe that the first human beings came down from Earth to Earth from the sky. So Jatwang was saying perhaps they were aliens, in the story. I mean, maybe our ancestors were aliens. Maybe our Wancho people believe that. So anyway, one thing and another, this gourd thing looked rather like an alien, and it connected very well with the whole theme of the story, which is how the first chief came out of the gourd. So we made all these masks with gourds, and we did all this kind of clay modeling and cutouts, just like we were doing upstairs now. And those participants, my young participants, got, as you can see, they did get quite enthusiastic. Yeah, this is the elder brother and the younger brother who descended from the sky, trying to film them there with the green screen. This is all in the tribal village, and we were really lucky. Kamuanoknu is the name of the village, and we were lucky because that school had like a power backup, a solar power, because the village, so much of the time there's no electricity, right? And we had to have lights, we had to have cameras, charging and everything. Luckily, the school office had the solar backup, so we could somehow manage. It all managed. And the little tribal chief that I had made, I took him with me, and of course they loved to see him. And she was really great, this girl, Choi Mai. She really picked it up quickly. She really enjoyed animating that chief. Oh. And then, yes, filming the gourd with the blue screen. This is the school office turned into a film studio with the lights which I had brought all the way from across the country. And this is the chief's house in Kamuanoknu village. There's a scene where he's log drumming. One of the brothers is drumming on that big log, and that big log cannot be moved, so we had to do our filming in the chief's house. The fellow wearing the cap, he's actually the chief of that village. There's me with the models. Okay, and quickly, we then did our workshop at Nehu there in March. Our 2-week workshop. And everything changed, but eight Wancho people leads with the students and young people. Ayan from NID, recently just graduating from NID, and these are the Wancho people there in the top, going to the library for the first time, at the big university library. And then, okay, so this project is quite busy project because It's illustrations. We're going to bring out a book now. Some illustrations I did. And students are doing illustrations, and Wancho people are also doing illustrations. So it's a cross-cultural project. Some illustrations for... We're doing a book of... Because there is no book of Wancho stories, and we've collected and translated the stories. So we're doing the illustrated book. Models. Okay. And I think now I'll just take a break, and I'll just show you some... I'll show you some Wancho stuff. Yeah.
ये कहानी है दो भाइयों की, पर ये दो भाई कोई साधारण आदमी नहीं थे। ये थे ऊंचे आसमानों में रहने वाले दिव्य पुरुष। तो हुआ यूं कि एक बार आसमान से छोटे भाई की नजर पड़ी धरती पर, और चमकती सुंदर धरती को देखकर वो धरती पर उतर आया। और कुछ दिन वो धरती पर ही रहा, और वापस जाते हुए ले गया अपने साथ कुछ मिट्टी, जिसे उसने चर्बी मिलाकर चमकदार बनाया। भाई, ये देखो, क्या तुमने ऐसी चमकदार मिट्टी देखी है कहीं?
ये कहां की मिट्टी है?
ये वहां की मिट्टी है जहां नदियां बहती हैं, ठंडी हवाएं चलती हैं, पेड़ लहलहाते हैं, हजारों रंग के फूल खिलते हैं।
ये कहां है?
इन ऊंचे आसमानों से भी सुंदर वो जगह है धरती। पर इस सुंदरता का असली मजा सिर्फ और सिर्फ धरती पर जाकर ही मिल सकता है।
तो मैं भी जाऊंगा धरती पर?
देख धरती के सुंदर नजारे, नदियां, बादल, फूल, बहारें, मस्त हुआ घूमा और झूमा, अगला पिछला अब भूला सारे। पर यह क्या हुआ? दोनों भाई एक दूसरे को चेतावनी देते रहे, हफ्तों तक, महीनों तक, सालों तक। समय के साथ धरती पर रहते हुए बड़े भाई ने अनाज उगाना और शिकार करना सीख लिया था। पर एक दिन हाथ में दाव लिए बड़ा भाई जा रहा था अपने खेतों की तरफ। चौंकने पर जब बड़े भाई ने छोटे भाई को भगवान कह के बुलाया, तो छोटे भाई की शक्ति के प्रभाव के कारण वो भगवान कहलाया जाने लगा। तब बड़े भाई ने बचने के लिए झोंपड़ी बनाई, और छोटे भाई ने लगातार बारिश और बिजली कड़काई, और प्रलय की तरह सब कुछ डुबो दिया। बची तो सिर्फ 4 पहाड़ियां और इन पर ठहरे लोग। समय बीतता गया और लोग फिर अपनी झूम खेती करने लगे।
So anyway, work in progress. That was just a 2-week workshop. And what they decided, these technical guys who had come, basically Vijay Punya and Deepak from Trustee, they were faculty from Trustee who had come, they decided that it would be, in order to avoid doing all that green screening, which is actually quite complicated to do because of lighting and things like that and shadows, that they would film it like that, and they would break up the screen into like a comic book. So it would somehow, it would help to get rid of this the need for the green screen. And also it would be something different, a different way of, instead of looking at it just as breaking it up the frame in interesting ways, is what they were trying to do. And so the Wancho animation project is really got a lot of local involvement. They really are, it's very successful in that way. I feel that it's something I'm actually doing together, pretty much together with the community. But now, of course, the situation is that it has to be animated, and I'm hoping that it can be animated by my colleagues there at Trustee, but we're having a few issues about it at the moment, which is delaying the project. But that's the Wancho project. And finally, in the last half an hour of means in about, in 15 minutes or so, or 20 minutes, half an hour, I'm going to show a documentary film, which is 26 minutes long. It's pretty interesting if you are interested in that kind of thing, because it's all about the whole background of this Wancho project and all the people that have worked with me on it. The myths of the Wancho. But now I just quickly want to talk briefly about the next chapter, which is this Andaman project. Andaman. So we have this Su Tao. This is the Nagaland project with the backlit, which is kind of an international collaboration because Leslie Mackenzie animated it in Scotland, taking that material. Then we have the Wancho project, which is a local collaboration because I've been working a lot with them. And now we have this third case study in this project, which is the Andaman one, which is something completely different because, again, I'm not able to go there and interact with those people for political reasons. So far I have been unable to, but I'm hoping to still. But there's very few of these Andamanese people left. There's actually about 53 of them left of this particular Andamanese group of people whose story I'm looking at. And I have found the Andamanese story in a book which was written in 1922, just about 100 years ago or so, by a colonial anthropologist, but he did do remarkable work there in the Andaman Islands, Alfred Radcliffe Brown. He wrote the book in 1922 called The Andaman Islanders, and it really inspired me, the stories, because they're very unusual and different. But I haven't been able to meet any Andamanese storytellers. I have met with other researchers who have had some contact with Andamanese people. So yeah, I'm going to show you some little things I've been working on the Andaman Islands story. It's a story about I just show you a little bit of this film, which is again a work in progress, the Andaman story.
Our ancestors were the animals. We always call them by their titles, Maya or Da, Sir, and Mimi or In, lady. The ancestors lived at Water Emi, and Biliku lived opposite to them, across the strait at a place called Tolokotima. or became a bird. The patch of red feathers on its neck is where he was burnt by the fire. Dapeti was the first ancestor to spear and catch turtles. He went fishing one day and he only got one small fish. In those days, the ancestors did not know the names of the fruit and the trees. What is your name? What is your name? What is your name? My name is Kono. Oh, I did not know. Why did you not say so before? What is your name? What is your name? Yeah, my name is Tug. You can take me along with you. The pigs and the turtles are off to a meeting at Tebjuru in the archipelago. We have not been invited. Let's go anyway. We need some clay paint. You can get it from the houses of the ants. This is gono, and this is how we cook it. This was the first time that the ancestors ate gono. Dapeti taught the people how to dance and sing. All the people were afraid because he was very strong. No one could hold Dapeti. At last, Dabarag stopped him. Dapeti had the resin and he made a torch. Piliku was very angry. She went mad. She destroyed the whole world. There was a flood at Water Emu and the sea rose over the land. Da Petit and in vain managed to keep the fire alight. The hill is called Bain Itkapa, Bain's fire, to the present day. Biliku was always getting angry because they ate yams and honey and these belonged to her. Finally, it was Dakonoro's song that brought back the day.
Te wo toke zeke tsiki cheni lide ku shupo kejake no lo tangoji.
Sochi. Opala omustam amuskase. Happiness je die beka. Sochi. Bugide di bibe robe. Onwatsha. Kya robe fa shijete.
Suchi se nagami fuko za le kolo. Bugi bubi za kejake no lo hute deji. Jio gede lo. Ujeki gile kami vishalo. Sokoni fu zotawo kala gaze buji.
Komsu gile bakile slow. Ifu ye chamuta zopeta obedade kongo meto tsadehi. Koko isu ako yero fevisha. Shiki pelangata koko jada.
Mofo ke petze pura kolo miji de lo. No tsukutso lidi de mese befo tsopie powo.
Yeni gile. Ah, mesada. Hello.那是什么？那是不好。啊！你给写。不喜欢的，不是个绿米写的。哎，那是给他们是不给来的过的。别的，我其实也你么多。你别不论你做别不是的。也很有方便给来吃的。 你是哪一类吃的呢？
你这个时候给你们这里视频。
啊，是，左边到我的来的。也得了，也得一把块的，也得听着开娃娃的。
我给你开这个那么吃的。
耶！
你婆里莫那套啥儿吃了？是个子，得付了，拉出了，吃了，去吃了，来么不了。米那路么过白的，是说你，里地的过桥，开这个那了，得白的。等你面过过，开说米过。这副个在国内所里面给我的，人嘛个也在的，在两个这副个子嘛都没在的，可是你那个米个路么搞不的。
It's really a good time to study and apply this indigenous knowledge because of the environmental situation that the whole world is. And we got this idea, I don't know if you're aware of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and all. Well, all this comes naturally to the indigenous way of life. So really, I think that instead of imposing from outside, the thing is to look within and to learn from them about sustainable living, about their knowledge which helps them to live where they are, to manage their resources, and to get on and collaborate as a community. I think we have a lot to learn from them, and that's the main thing about what I am doing. Is it's a way using animation and media. And the other thing is the context, because I'm going to just say that because finally I'll show this documentary film, and I've got more into the medium of using documentary as well as animation, because people, they always want to know the context of the stories and these communities. So I'm exploring that medium of documentary and animation together. And so I'm going to show you a film at the end here soon, a 26-minute film which is not being released anywhere. It's something which I'm just kind of working on. It's not finalized and mastered yet. I wonder if there's any questions and anything. All these questions keep coming up, and I don't know if I've really got any answers, because each and every situation is different, yeah? And what is I say today and may be different for me even later. For one thing is, when you're doing experimental animation, you'd be unlikely to do a big project because the funding is the main issue, yeah? And it's pretty much virtually impossible to get any funding for experimental animation unless you're doing it in a kind of workshop educational context, or you might get a kind of a foundation grant or an award, a financial award, to be able to do it. But it's very few and far between, and it's pretty limited money what you get. So that's why you end up doing it yourself. So it really is, experimental is a self. But there are lots of filmmakers all over the world that are doing experimental animations by themselves, and they have also networks, and they meet and they share their experiences and things. So it's like a kind of a club of, just like there would be club of artists and storytellers, there's also clubs of experimental filmmakers and artists. And you never know, some of those films may actually go on and get acknowledged and recognized by mainstream society. It may get on television, but the problem is with television is that, you know, they really want bulk, mass. Doing a 5-minute film has got no interest to anyone on commercial television. At best, a few seconds, I mean like 30 seconds or whatever you could do in an advertisement using experimental techniques, but then that's not really experimental, it's just the technique is experimental. So yeah, so it's maybe unlikely to get on television, but there are so many now alternative avenues for distribution, you know, whether it's on the internet, whether it's in film festivals, you know, it's like niche audience. That's the main thing, I think, is it's niche audience, which is why all these formulas have been developed by the commercial industry in order to mass produce efficiently. So many minutes every week has to be done for these animated series. You can't compete with that in this experimental or indigenous storytelling way, because we do take a long time to make the films. So that's why in the educational thing. And you just see really which technique works well in shiny things, hard things like those elephants. Maybe for the organic, earthy stories, you can use clay modeling, you know. So the technique and the theme should complement each other, yeah? And like in this workshop, because we're doing a workshop here upstairs workshop is a 2-week course module in experimental animation, and we're just trying out all the different not all the techniques. Yeah, I might get an inspiration from a story that I've heard or read, and I start to think about, visualize it, and so each one is different, and you may have you have to be prepared also that this technique is not working, it's too time consuming, something doesn't work, okay, I switch to a different technique. Students to visualize the character, the mantis character in our story, as a clay model, as a cutout thing, color, see which one works. And that's the other thing, is when you're actually doing the animation as well, new ideas come to you. You start modeling with clay and you start animating with clay, and then you think, hey, this could really work. So you're getting ideas directly under the camera as well. But of course, it's so much hard work to do it, so you can't just endlessly experiment and things. So you have to be a bit focused. So it's that whole thing of being focused on the one hand. The animation is not so important. I mean, it's that you don't need to have very high-tech animation. What is people will come away with is the story, and the look of it is also should be attractive and interesting. The visual design and the story is more important than doing all kinds of very fancy animations.
Wancho nu, mai ni.
I am a filmmaker. My project is to collaborate with people from the Wancho community of Northeast India to interpret one of their traditional stories for a short animated film. But what about these stories? Where do they come from and what do they mean?
We have to document all the histories and cultures and every activities of the Wancho. It is versus to extinction. That's why the documentation is very important these days. My name is Banawanasu from Wancho community of Arunachal Pradesh. And since last 3 days we are in Assam because we are planning to do Wancho comic book, and for that we need a recording of the stories, all story, folk tales. Government is not allowed Tara to go on Arunachal Pradesh, and without proper research and recording and knowing the realities to make and such a story is very, very tough job. We are in the Assam is Sonari. The place of Assam is Sonari. We went to the Arunachal border and calling the storyteller from the Arunachal Pradesh, Longning district, and we had some recordings since last 3 days, and it is very wonderfully beautiful stories we have collected. The historical story and the mythological story what we have. And many story is to be recorded yet. So we cannot now say what kind of story we will use in the comic book. Our next attempt is to get permission from the Indian government to go there so that we can have a good research. In Wancho area now, only the older people understand about the folk songs, folk tales, and the past history and the story of the Wancho. In the school, we are teaching the moral education system, not all for the culture, our culture and history and the migration of the past. So the younger people are not knowing about themselves. This is a very, very big issue, and so we should document so that the new generation and younger generation also know about the past of this Wancho. The story is varies from village to village, and it is not used regularly. That's why many people forgot some missing parts there. We have to collect the different stories. Then only we can get the original idea what could be the possible of the story. So far, nobody has written the Wancho story and folk tales in deeper level. So outside people don't understand yet about the Wancho. What is Wancho? From where Wancho came? How they are living? And what is their culture? Nobody knows about these things. Community involvement is very, very, very important because they are a resource person and the production will be used by them. What we are doing is for them only. If the community is not accepting, it is not of use. It needs authenticity. Otherwise, some may criticize, and this story is not like that. Why you do this kind of story like that? To avoid such kind of criticism, we could do the double checking and with involving the maximum people, it could be very nice.
How many family members have you got?
Earlier it was joint family around 28, but now one brother is separated, and his mother and brothers also went there. We are now around 11 or 12. And this is first time for us to work on such kind of project in the Wancho area. And the Wancho area is very healthy and not with good communication, especially in the summer season. Sometimes road is blocked and it is far from the mainland. That's why it may get difficulties. We should work with sincerity and devotion so that other people realize what is the value of this work, and we are documenting the culture, the stories of the Wancho. We are planning to produce different type of stuffs like animation film. After this project is over, we will attempt to develop the pedagogy with the Wancho story, history, and in Wancho a script, and it will be introduced in formal education system to teach the students in the government school or private school. Now I have to translate the story into English, but I am not very expert in English. That's why I need the help of Tara. Before illustration, we should make the storyboard so that the outcome will be very good. If possible, I just thinking about the bilingual production of comic books. One will be in the Wancho language and another will be in the English language, so that Wancho and non-Wancho both people can read and understand the story. Quality work should be there. After completion of that, if we want the larger exposure, we can release in Delhi or abroad also, if possible. Could be released in Longding also, like Oriya Festival. It celebrates annually in the month of February.
Actually, my interest is to teach people, especially the persons who wants to learn something new. We generally consult the expert who can just tell on what day the leaf has to be collected, on what day the bamboo has to be collected for construction of house. My father was the expert who can calculate the exact time. People used to follow. If we cut the bamboos or we collect the palm leaves on that particular day, then the insects will not attack. That was the system. Because it was taken according to the season, the calculation of the month, the moon. So it worked. For fishing also, my father was consulted regarding that. When he was alive, he used to be consulted before fishing. When I was in school, maybe in class 8th standard, that time my father suggested that today is the correct time when the fish will lay eggs. And I went with my uncles and we got a huge catch. It's all the technique of calculating the cycle of the nature. If the person is expert in calculating the nature, how this system works, then he is nature expert, we can say. That kind of expert thing used to exist here in this village. Apart from my father, there are also some few men still exist here. They can calculate moon circulation and they can tell on which month, on which day the work has to be done and what time the work has to be done. And accordingly, if we work, there will be no problem. Untimely collection of bamboos, untimely collection of palm leaves would be like a suicidal. These insects will eat up all those construction materials. So before that, the expert has to be consulted. This thing happens, but slowly we are fearing that those experts are going to die, and we have never recorded, we have never consulted, and we have never documented such kind of expert people.
Abang gam trung một pa gam pa man pui gam lok kuya pu pa man pa gam paham man pa ha ga ma ta san phi mo ngai mo ku ta ma.
He got the technique of doing rituals from his father, and likewise his father also got knowledge of performing the rituals from his father. Whatever he did was passed on from his ancestor. Gampa means a ritual expert. There is some power coming to that particular kind of person. That person was then designated as, we call it, Asi. Asi means some kind of extraordinary person. Asi can also foretell the future by through his dream. At least 9 villages are visible, Wancho villages. The nearest village which is Kamhanoglu, and after that we see again a big village, and that is Ninu village.
Rok cả khá là rộng xa can hôn lý nhỉ. Chấp là mới ao rắc văng xuống ngạc bà làm là ngạc mày bà rắc tiếp lưu.
They are my mothers. First one is my real mother, and the other one is my stepmother. Both of them just now have shared about all the difficulties faced by the people during famine. And they said that when famine comes, a kind of plant is there which we call it as dog, and that has to be cut down after performing a certain rituals. Inside that plant there is a soft portion, and that has to be made it powder first, and the soft powder will be taken as food. Its taste is a little bit sweet, something like a sweet potato. God was always wanting to have the horn. He was always wanting to have the horn from the dog. Dog took out his horn, both the horns, and kept something like here. He took the advantage of the moment, and he just took the horn which was kept by the dog, and he just took the horn which was kept, and he took and ran away as fast as he could.
This is my house. I live in here, and my mother is there, and my father, and again my grandfather and my grandmother is there. My name is Tungi Game.
Mai nào cư dân tôn bạn một cây mưu gây lấy gây ngạc kinh lê trong thầy ô hào cây phong ban cứ đặc bò hò khăm non cứ hạ theo ra trong lê chinh bằng tu Magang pu janmana ye.
Wangsa is a part of chief's family or chief's clan, and the Pansa clan is the opposite clan. So Wangsa boy can marry Pansa girl. Yeah, but Manman's grandmother and father, they both are Pansa, and Manman is from usually Wangsa. Wangsa and Losu is same. If Wangsa marries the same title within a village, within the same village, that will be regarded as an illegal thing within the village. So that person has to be punished, or even they have to be excommunicated from the village.
Ani agaknya thong mình hệ du con của con con của mình này rồi cái gì hết tiền nào
Tung pa ga uchanga ka chong na uchanga ka chong na thok ba aga ma mai chi ki cha mai chele ma la ga khnyak gem ni pai le ngai da a ki cha mai na cha ma le bu jam kwam cha umuk chom cha la na chile phai la tong pa gan gai thok ba ga ka ngai cha ka ngai ga gai ma dai le.
One elder brother got onto the earth, and he settled there. That's the first part of the story. But after a few years, the flood came on the earth, and everybody was washed away, except few persons who settled on the top of the mountain, and from among that top of the mountain, who survived, that was the Tompa.
Siki bugum diak mapa bang nau ki siki bang am pan pu le bang tak ji le tong ma ga siki bang nau ki ga la pan pu le bang le thele ala ma pe la kam ho ma ga bang cha thong dong di bang cha thau thong di le cha thong pa di ong kap na ki pan la pe le ala ma pe le.
That kind of god used to be used for making masks. Putting masks and just acting was done during tattoo rituals. Suppose a young girl is being tattooed on her leg or her body. I saw that god mask when I was child, but now, but these days I haven't seen the similar thing which I saw in the childhood days. Every child used to get fear of that thing. Generally, when this kind of drama, this kind of act used to be displayed. Mask seems like an alien when it be put on the face. So I think the ancestor stories is connected to some kind of alien. Due to heavy devastation of natural calamity, everything was destroyed. Few people only were left alive on this Lanchankovin, which is a famous hilltop as per the Wancho story. To rule over to these few people that were left alive, one leader was required. And the last part is the story of how the man Topa was a common man. He was not a chief, he was not a leader, but he got a chief, came out from the god, is the story. And the chief which came out from the god was actually a descendant of some kind of supernatural, or we can say god. We need to make a good connection between these two stories.
The petungam kushu kushaga I'm a kangai, I'm a shook night, look at him, I like a compay van from a caranga. I take a man, you should keep Gumdiak, mình bớt nhạc ta tông bà cái thằng ngà quan phụ xong mà thì cái này pan cho vào ngày cả bạn nhiều cả là thầu chú dụ là căn là ta tông bà cái mấy cỡ xả cỡ lờ gần lờ ta vào ngầm chạy xả chứ y là tại là cái cỡ ní gần là xén chưa gọi là căn là mấy cỡ xả cỡ là và ngầm người lạ bà thằng người ngày là người gì chứ là ngày lạ tông bà có mà bùa tắc bà ngầm gì ngày lạ làm bể là ngầm mức kiềm cái là á chứ lì là bà thằng bùa cái cái nó nhôm van cả chứ là ngầm hạt bà thằng bữa từ bữa và ngầm gì à là tất cả cái tông bà cái và ngầm tắc bà cái mỹ mình thằng có mà bùa cha thằng cái số thằng bùa gì bữa cái bùa tắc bà vâng ngầm mới giao cái chỉ mi các bạn nhiều mới giao bùa tắc bà ngầm lạ vâng nè vâng ngầm giao cái giá mình từng ngày là bùa quắm tông bà tắc bà ngầm lạ vâng nè bùa chút bà gan gậy vâng.
This particular spot, they suspect that Topa must have found the gold here.
Không xí lắm nàng hát kìa.
Uki changale, mai sa changale, lo nu lo sa wa ka jan hai li jan pao pao. Jan Haili Jan Pao Pao.
I am also interested to learn new things. Like suppose this animation is a new thing for me. It's a way of telling the stories, the way of communicating.
Nang ao, nang phone paywa, nang man phang laman no. Ai agan koi kawan, man thang le an koi pu.
Sunday आपको ये थोड़ा सा ये वहाँ में माचंग बनता है हम लोग.
A chief came out from the gold. Is the story.
आपका ये ऐसे होगा पार्टी करेगा. ऐसे करेगा.
One piece will be given to each person. Like this, there are so many, around 2,000. This will be served when the feast will be held. It's a kind of extra meat to the elderly people as a mark of respect, as an honor to the elder persons.
The animation is not so important. I mean, it's that you don't need to have very high-tech animation. What is people will come away with is the story. And the look of it is also should be attractive and interesting. The visual design and the story is more important than doing all kinds of very fancy animations. So in that Tsutawa story, the animation is kind of simple, childish, but the story is so captivating in the way it's told. Storytelling should be the primary thing, is what I'm saying. Over technique, the storytelling is the primary thing.